It is yet to be released. It's coming out on December the 31st. And effectively, it's to try and counteract that sort of barrage of new you, new year messaging that we all get every year that just makes us feel a bit shit about ourselves. Um, so, what's interesting about this book is that it was largely written prior to the pandemic and slightly updated as a result of it, but it feels like it's kind of only become more current as a result of 2020. Um, Eleanor Ross, who wrote it, is a 32-year-old London-based journalist who is originally from Sheffield. And on the face of it, she's a huge success. This is her second book. She's written for every big newspaper and magazine going. She's traveled the world doing it. But like I think probably many people in the media, the picture looks a lot rosier than it is. And like many freelancers, she didn't want to say no to any work. She said yes to every project. She was completely overwhelmed to the point that in 2019, she found herself exhausted, depressed, and ended up in A&E on suicide watch. Now, before I go on, I'm going to read a little bit about the introduction because she can probably explain her motivations for writing this better than I can. She says here, I've just dropped my mouse, excuse me. She says here, with COVID, I think we're all starting to reach forks in the road, working out what we're happy to put up with and what changes we want to make. And this was my fork. One path, it's more of the same. It's staying at work late. It's trying to get to the gym every morning. It's scrolling through social media and wondering why we're not in Tahiti. It's cramming a hastily cooked ready meal into our bodies and immediately feeling guilty about it, but knowing that we have no choice if we actually want to see our friends after work. It's reading about the lives of celebrities and setting our alarms to 3 a.m. to see if getting up early and taking cold showers has any effect on our productivity. It's taking a vacation but spending it learning how to ski or speak Japanese instead of reading a book. It's about an exhausting, fulfilling, but ultimately busy life that's so intense we just want to scream, stop. In Gio Tolentino's book, Trick Mirror, she says, being alive seems to be about organizing your life around practices you find ridiculous and possibly indefensible. So maybe we should think about stopping that. The other path, there are fewer people yelling at you on social media platforms. Your boss isn't always messaging you on your personal phone. You have time for yourself doing the things you actually want to do, and it's a little brighter, and perhaps it could be the new normal. What happened to our generation that made it feel fine to say yes to everything? Can we blame everything on the 2008 recession and social media, or is there more at play? And effectively, what this book is about is answering those questions. What is it that drives us to hammer ourselves into the ground in pursuit of success? And is the success that we're told to crave what we actually want in the first place? If we could go to the first slide, please. So, the fear of mediocrity is real and it has a name. The name for the fear of mediocrity is coinophobia. And effectively, it's the fear of ending up in the same place as our parents forever, of living in a semi in suburbia, wearing cardigans unironically and dying without an obituary. And it leads many people to feel torn about their futures from a young age. Where do they want to be? Where do they want to move to? What should they do? Go, go, go. We have to do it all. And then it leaves us feeling guilty when it doesn't work out, or we want to return closer to home, to be near our family, to put down roots, to start our own family. So we're in this constant drive to outrun it, and it's leaving today's 20s, 30s, 40-somethings completely burnt out. Mental health's in crisis, we're working longer hours, but the inequality gap is going. And what she's saying here is effectively, we've been raised for a world that doesn't exist. Since probably people who are in their younger 40s downwards, we got into this idea that we told every child from the day they were born that they're special. And to be special, there has to be a normal, there has to be a baseline, and most people have to sit on that. But when we tell every single person that they're special, what it leads to is this coinophobia, this idea that we need to be special. And so we've all been told that we can do anything that we want if we just work hard enough, but that idea relies on us living in a meritocracy, and we don't. You only need to look at the Houses of Parliament right now and the number of well-connected and completely useless old Etonians that are in there to understand that nepotism is very real indeed. But what happens if we're told that we're special and brilliant and we can all be Prime Minister is that when we aren't, and we don't blame the system, we blame ourselves. If we could go to the next slide, please. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to outrun a system that wasn't built for what we were told it was. And it's exhausting. We're all on a treadmill and trying not to fall on our arses. But during COVID, we've had a clearer indicator than ever before of just what it is that we're up against. And towards the start of the book, and I realise all of this sounds quite doom and gloom, it is going to get better, I promise. But Eleanor looks at the exam results scandal and the fact that an algorithm was applied to the marking of kids who missed their exams. And the algorithm was slightly different across all 4 home nations, but it produced a very similar trend across all of them, which is that kids from state schools were far more likely to see their teachers' predictions downgraded. The less successful your school had been historically, the more dramatically you were going to be downgraded. And what that effectively showed us in black and white was that when broken down into code by computer, what we've long failed to acknowledge is that those who start with more achieve more. And that's the system that so many of us are fighting against daily in a less visible way. It's present in our offices, at our board tables, in our management charts, all across Britain. But that is where we start punishing ourselves and thinking that, okay, I'm not getting ahead, but I've been told that I'm special. Therefore, what I need to do is I need to work harder and I need to work longer. And those expectations begin to creep into our non-working lives too. And this is where I found the book very interesting. If we could go to the next slide, please. We are effectively monetizing or making transactional every aspect of our lives in a bid to get towards success. And what the book does very successfully is break down all of these different aspects where we're applying these measures of success to things in life that really should be a joy. So if you take food as an example, ready meals were created as time savers when women started entering the workplace in recognition of the fact that people couldn't do everything. What they are now is they are seen as a negative, which to a large degree nutritionally they are, but what that results in is everybody trying to cook sustainably, locally, organically, all the time. And when you fail, you feel a stonking case of the guilt. It makes us feel crap. Same goes for the gym. It should be about, as Mark was saying, moving your body to feel better, to feel healthier, to feel more at one with yourself. But now it's become about success and self-discipline and how we're told that the most successful people in the world get up at 4 a.m. to work out every day. And anyone who's ever posted a run on Instagram knows that there is a certain amount of performative nature to it all. We want people to know that we're doing it right. And then something I found really interesting was the fact that over just the last few years, the word hobby has been almost lost in our vernacular to the term side hustle. And side hustles can be a brilliant thing. They can give huge satisfaction to an awful lot of people, but they've created this idea that all of our downtime and our hobbies need to be spent being productive. And whether it's painting or jam making or writing or making clothes, the kind of overarching idea now is that if we're not making money from it or trying to, then we're not doing it right. And maybe you just want to have a hobby that doesn't involve the admin of eBay or Etsy or Instagram, but that's become kind of demonstrative of a lack of ambition almost. And this whole thing, it works within a system that just isn't working for an awful lot of people anymore. And I found the chapter here on housing incredibly interesting, where Eleanor is younger than me, she's a millennial, and a lot of this is very much geared at that generation. But since the 1980s, we've worked towards this idea that the right to buy a house is just that, a right. And yet the differential between average salaries and deposits and mortgages has grown ever larger. the rental system hasn't kept up and it infantilizes grown adults. And so there were these kind of quotes in the book that I was really taken aback by, but that make perfect sense, from people saying, I've grown up watching cookery shows and interior shows, but I'm 35 and I'm relegated to one tiny shelf in a communal fridge, still sharing a house with people. I can't paint my walls. I can't hang pictures. I'm not even allowed a cat. And it's the whole system is kind of then pushing back all of the other success markers of success that we've lined up for adulthood. If you're renting, do you feel secure enough to start a family? If you're saving for a deposit, can you afford to take time off? Can you afford to spend time with your friends? It has a huge impact on all of the other aspects of our life. So, yes, it does all sound a little bit hopeless, but it's not, because if we can move on to the next slide, what she's actually trying to do is say, in this year particularly, we all have an opportunity to reconnect with ourselves and accept that the notion of success and the markers that we use to measure it are actually largely irrelevant to many of us. And if you can ignore the bin fire that's going on outside the window for a moment and stop and ask what we're doing it for, it becomes a little bit clearer that actually a lot of the time we're doing it because we think we should and not because we want to. And there's an incredibly interesting chapter about friendship and community and how important it is to people. And it delves into a lot of historical and anthropological research about how we build our villages and our support system. And our obsession with the hustle and the strive is actually very detrimental to the way that we operate as a society. And historically, we've found that societies were tended to be organized into a large group of around 150 distant acquaintances, and it moves ever closer till you've got a group of sort of 5 confidants. They're the people that you would call in an emergency. And biologically, we have a finite amount of social capital to spend to spread across that group. The average person today has 338 friends on Instagram, but feels lonelier than ever. We're trying to spread that social capital across a greater number of people all the time, and not actually taking the time off to be able to assess how we're doing it. And a lot of the modern markers of success, notoriety, audience, 10, 20, 30,000 followers on Instagram to support those side hustles, are leaving us feeling like we're spread far too thin. And what we're losing out on there is human connection. We're networking instead of connecting. And that's a very easy fix. We can choose to pull back. We can choose to check out the digital world on occasion and prioritize family and friends and reconnect with the people that matters. And 2020 has actually illustrated that for a lot of us, it's those connections, those in-person connections that we crave. And that actually a lot of the goals that we're striving towards every day aren't helping with that. And some very small changes can have a very dramatic impact on that. If we could go to the last slide, please. So essentially, at the heart of it, the book is, conversely, given the title, which is Good Enough, the myth of success and how to celebrate the joy in being average. It's not really about being average. It's more a call to individualism. It's saying that not everything is futile and pointless, but rather that we're all striving to someone else's idea of success. And if we just stop and ask ourselves why we're doing what we're doing and what our ultimate aim is, then we could all be a lot happier. It's basically saying you do you. If you want to learn Japanese on holiday, that's brilliant, get in there. But if you feel like you have to learn Japanese on holiday because the idea of 2 weeks of being unproductive fills you with dread, then the chances are the last thing you should be doing is taking a learning holiday. It's more about realizing that it's absolutely okay to find the joy in the mundane, in a walk on the beach and swimming and sex and eating the goddamn cake. And we can choose to keep our hobbies to hobbyism and not try to monetize them. And we can choose to reduce our hours and reduce our salaries and not strive for the big house, if that means that we've got more time to socialize and to breathe and to spend time doing what feels important to us. And what's really interesting about that is that what she's saying is, if we really do want to be special, maybe we do it by trying to change the system. changing the rental system, setting up businesses that are expressly aimed at changing the way that we work, from HRs pushing blind recruitment to the zebra businesses that are trying to find a more ethical way forward. The things that give us a real feeling of accomplishment aren't necessarily the things that are going to drive us towards our financial goals, but they will provide us probably with greater benefits on a personal and societal level. So it's really about just saying, if you're knackered, you can put the ball down. You can go and choose to play on a different field, and actually, in doing so, you might just find a less mediocre way to be than you are on in the current state. And that's kind of my crib notes on good enough.